She thought she was just protecting her peace. But when her daughter-in-law demanded to wear her late husband's wedding ring, what started as a simple no tore an entire family apart. You know how people say some things are just objects, metal, wood, or fabric, but somehow, some of them hold entire lives inside. That's what my husband's wedding ring is to me. Just a simple gold band, no diamonds, no engraving, no shine left after years of wear, but to me, it still feels alive. I'm 62 now. My husband passed away 10 years ago. We were married for 35 years, and through everything, kids, moves, rough times, laughter, that ring stayed with us. After he died, I kept it in a little wooden box with some of his old things. A photograph from our first vacation, a tie he wore every Christmas, a note he once slipped into my lunchbox. Sometimes when I miss him, really miss him, I open that box, take the ring out, and hold it for a while. It's the closest I can get to feeling him again. So when my daughter-in-law, Jenna, asked if she could borrow it, it hit me in a way I didn't expect. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. She's mentioned the ring before, little comments when she visits. Things like, "It's so timeless," or, "I'd love to wear something with that kind of history." I always assumed she was just being polite. But last week, during coffee, she came right out and said, "Would you mind if I wore it for a while? Just to feel closer to the family? To honor him?" I didn't even know what to say. It felt like someone had suddenly asked to borrow a piece of my memory. I tried to explain, gently, that the ring wasn't just jewelry, it was a part of my husband, that I kept it not for display, but for comfort. But she didn't take it that way. Her expression hardened. She said I was being selfish. That maybe I didn't trust her. She told me I was locking away something that belonged to the family, instead of sharing its meaning. She even said, "It would mean more to me to wear it than for you to keep it in a box." And I'll be honest, those words stung. Later that night, I got a long text from her, pages of emotional writing about how she felt excluded, like an outsider in our family. She hinted that maybe I was stuck in the past, that I was holding on to grief too tightly. She said I was controlling. That one broke my heart, because the last thing I ever wanted was to make anyone feel unwelcome. But still, how do you explain to someone that this one little ring is the thread that keeps you tethered to someone you loved for most of your life? When my son heard about it, he didn't say much. I think he didn't want to get involved. But later, I heard from another family member who said maybe I was overreacting, that it was just a ring. Just a ring. If only they knew. That ring was there when we exchanged vows, when we brought our first child home from the hospital, when we sat in that cold doctor's office together waiting for test results. It was there on his hand when he took mine during his last moments. How do you hand that to someone else and say, "Sure, go ahead, wear it for a while"? So I stood my ground. I told Jenna I couldn't do it, and since then, there's been tension. Now she barely talks to me. My son is quiet, careful with his words. Other relatives are whispering that I'm being difficult, dramatic even. And I keep replaying it in my head, wondering, am I really being too harsh? I don't want to lose peace in the family. But I also can't lose the one thing that still feels like him, the internet's take. When I posted this story online, the responses flooded in. People had strong opinions. One person wrote, "She's not even related to your husband by blood. A child asking for it maybe. But your daughter-in-law? Absolutely not. That ring is yours. She has zero claim to it. What in say fragility?" Another added, "Who are these family members saying your late husband's wedding ring is just another piece of jewelry? That's bananas. The ring symbolizes your 35-year marriage. It's not for anyone else to wear." Someone else said something that really stuck with me. If the ring isn't that big of a deal, then it's not a big deal not to wear it. You can't have it both ways. And they were right. If she thinks it's just a ring, then why does she want it so badly? I even drafted a message I wish I'd sent Jenna. "While I appreciate that you want to feel closer to our family, this isn't the way to do it. That ring is a symbol of my marriage to the love of my life. It's not something I loan out or give away. It was inappropriate for you to ask, and even more inappropriate to get angry when I said no." People online told me to hide the ring whenever Jenna visits or wear it myself. And honestly, that's exactly what I've started doing. But then something strange happened. After that post went viral, something unexpected happened. Something that honestly unsettled me. A few hours after I posted, I got a text from Jenna. It said, "You need to stop talking to strangers about our family. I'm really disappointed in you." Then my son called me, upset. He said I was embarrassing the family, airing private matters online. He told me I needed to keep things within the family, and suddenly, I felt watched. How did she even find my post? I didn't tell anyone about it. I just made that account that same day. I'm not tech savvy, I barely know how Reddit works. But somehow, she found it. And now I feel like she's keeping tabs on me, tracking what I say. I don't know who to trust anymore. A moment of reflection. When you're a widow, people assume the hardest part is the loneliness. And yes, that's a big part of it. But sometimes, what really hurts is having to constantly defend the small, fragile ways you keep your memories alive. For me, that gold band isn't about wealth, or inheritance, or status. It's about the weight of a promise. Maybe Jenna just doesn't understand that kind of love yet. Maybe one day, when she's been married 35 years, she'll realize why a plain gold ring can mean everything. Until then, I'll keep it safe. Not out of spite, but out of love. You know that moment when you realize someone doesn't respect your rules, even when it comes to your own child? That's the moment everything changes. I'm 25. My husband is 27. We just had our baby boy 4 months ago, a tiny miracle that's completely changed our world. Like any new mom, I'm protective. Maybe overly so, but after what happened, I don't think I was overreacting at all. My mother-in-law though, she doesn't see it that way. She's got what she calls old-school parenting wisdom. I call it outdated nonsense. She believes in spanking, letting babies cry it out, tough love. All the things I promised myself I'd never do. Every time she visits, she has something to say. You're spoiling him. Or, we did this with our kids and they turned out fine. I usually bite my tongue. I know she means well. But 3 weeks ago, she crossed a line I can't ignore. The Fruit Loops incident. She told me out of nowhere that she used to put cereal in her baby's bottles. Not baby rice cereal, mind you, but actual cereal. I told her no. Politely at first. I explained that it's dangerous, babies can choke or inhale the mixture into their lungs. Even my husband backed me up. We were firm. We will not be doing that. She smiled like she understood. And then, on Saturday, while I was upstairs taking a nap, she did it anyway. When I came down, there she was holding my baby, feeding him a bottle with Fruit Loops floating inside. Fruit Loops, not only cereal but bright, sugary, artificial candy, disguised as breakfast. I froze for half a second. Then I lost it. Completely. I told her to get out. She said, "You can't make me. This is my son's house too." I said, "Then I'll call the police, because you're refusing to leave my home after endangering my baby." That got her moving. She stormed out, but instead of going home, she parked her car across the street, and sat there just waiting until my husband came home from work. The aftermath. When he got home, she ran up to him crying, saying I'd kicked her out for no reason. He listened. Calmly. Then he told her, "Mom, I asked you to stop doing that last week." That was news to me. So she'd done it before, and he hadn't told me. I was furious with both of them. I told her she'd never be alone with my son again. Not now, not ever. I said she'd broken my trust, and there was no coming back from that. She screamed that I was controlling, a helicopter mom, a bad parent. She said I was making a big deal out of nothing, that the baby's fine, but she wasn't the one lying awake at night, picturing what could have happened. I banned her from our house completely. I told my husband the only way she'd ever step foot inside again was if I had cameras installed everywhere and she stayed in my sight at all times. He tried to mediate, saying, she didn't mean harm. But harm doesn't need intention, it only needs one reckless choice. The family explosion. Things blew up in the family group chat. It included me, my husband, his mom, his 2 sisters, my parents, and my sister. She unleashed on me, called me controlling. Said I was raising a weak child. Said I was paranoid. My parents stepped in, they defended me immediately. My mom wrote, "She's the baby's mother. Respect her boundaries or stay away." As an Evergees and Siam, my dad simply said, "Feeding a 4-month-old Fruit Loops is child endangerment." Her side of the family, though, wasn't as reasonable. They said I was overreacting, that the baby's fine, that I was creating drama. One of her daughters, my husband's sister, even said, "Yeah, Mom crossed the line. She did that with my daughter once. She popped her in the mouth when she cried. That's why she's not allowed to babysit her anymore." And that's when I realized this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. What people online said. When I shared my story online, strangers couldn't believe it. One comment that got thousands of likes said, "NTA. Your husband needs to step up and enforce the boundary. Don't ever let that woman in your house unsupervised again. She doesn't get to choose how to raise your child." Another added, "When you said cereal, I thought you meant baby rice cereal. Fruit Loops? What in the world? That's not old school. That's insane. She's lucky you didn't call child services." And honestly, that's how I felt too. Because when someone shows you they don't respect your rules as a parent, especially after being told explicitly that's not love, that's control dressed up as care. Where things stand. Now, I have cameras in every common area of my house. I did it not just because of her but because I realized something bigger. Boundaries protect relationships. If she ever visits again, and that's a big if, she'll know she's being watched. My husband and I are still working through it. He finally understands this isn't about being nice to his mom. It's about protecting our baby, and maybe one day, his mother will see that too. But until then, I'm not taking any chances. Not with my son, not with my peace. Because when you become a mother, you realize something. You're no longer just protecting your child from the world, you're sometimes protecting them from the people who think they know better. It's strange how fast your entire world can crumble. One day, you're folding laundry, thinking about what to cook for dinner. And the next, you're standing in your kitchen realizing the man you built your life with isn't who you thought he was. That's what happened to me last Saturday. My husband came home, sat me down, and said he had something to tell me. His voice shook, and my stomach dropped before he even spoke. He said, "I had an affair. There's a child. She's 9. My heart stopped. We have 2 kids, one is 10, the other barely 14 months. And now, there's another child. A stranger, who's part of him." He said something had happened to the girl's mother recently, and he needed to go get her. I didn't hear much after that. I was too busy screaming the decision. Later that night, our daughter came to me crying. She said her father told her she'd have to share her room and her things with this new girl. My husband hadn't even asked me. He'd just decided. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I called my parents. They live in a small condo, 2 bedrooms, cozy but safe. When I told them what happened, they didn't even hesitate. "Bring her here," my dad said. "We'll make room," my mom added. So the next morning, we packed up every one of my daughter's belongings. Her clothes, her posters, her books, her stuffed animals, everything. My parents, my sister, my brother-in-law, and my nephews came over to help. They moved everything to my parents' guest room. My daughter would stay with them until things got sorted. Then, we changed the locks on my bedroom and my son's, and we moved my husband's stuff, all of it, out of my room and into the small office he used for work. By the time he came home with the other girl, there was nothing of his left in our space. The confrontation. When he walked in, carrying bags and holding that little girl's hand, he stopped cold. He looked around at the empty shelves, the missing photos, and the spare room stripped bare. He turned to me, furious. "You moved all of her things out," he yelled. "She has nothing here now," I said quietly. "She has you. That's more than enough for now." He called me cruel. Said the girl didn't have winter clothes, that she'd come from somewhere warmer, and didn't even own a coat. I told him, "Then buy her one." He just stared at me like I was heartless. But what he didn't understand was this. My daughter didn't deserve to lose her room, her privacy, and her peace because of his choices. He didn't get to drop a bomb like that and expect us to rearrange our lives overnight. The internet's response. When I shared my story online, people flooded me with support and questions. One comment read, "You're not wrong for refusing to make your daughter share her room with your husband's affair child. But you should think about the long term. If you're moving your daughter out of her home permanently, that's not fair to her either. You need to get the husband out, not her. The not her side of maker emanator. Not her side with when rebelles." Another said, "His plan was selfish from the start. Instead of taking responsibility, he expected you and your daughter to adjust. That's not love. That's cowardice." And they were right. I hadn't processed it fully yet, but that's exactly what he was doing, expecting me to clean up the mess he made. The truth comes out. Later, after reading more comments, I finally confronted him again. He said he was planning to put the girl in the office room after cleaning it out and getting her new furniture. I told him it didn't matter, he hadn't told me that. All I knew was that he'd blindsided us, and told our daughter she'd have to share everything she owned with a stranger. He looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. But how do you explain to someone that trust doesn't survive on technicalities? When you betray your family, it's not just about the act itself, it's about what it tells everyone else. That their stability, their safety, their feelings come second to your impulses. My plan. So I told him the truth. I said, "I'm filing for divorce. My plan now is simple. My daughter stays with my parents until he moves out or until I do. I don't want to punish that other little girl. She didn't ask for this. But I also can't let my child pay the price for someone else's betrayal." When a man cheats, it's not just a secret, it's a decision that echoes through every corner of your home. It breaks the ground under your children's feet. And I'm not going to let him shatter their world and expect us to smile through it. A final reflection. Sometimes, people tell you to be the bigger person, to forgive, to think of the innocent child, to stay strong for the family. But what they don't understand is I am being the bigger person. I didn't yell in front of that little girl. I didn't call her names. I moved my daughter out because I refused to let her wake up in a room where her father's betrayal stared her in the face every morning. People think strength means staying, but sometimes, strength means leaving with your head high and your heart still intact. You never realize how peaceful your home is until someone moves in and turns it upside down. That's what happened when my husband's sister came to stay with us. I'm 36. My husband's 38. His sister Lisa is 28, sweet at first glance, but with a long history of being, well, irresponsible. She's the type who quits jobs every few months, maxes out credit cards, and always has a sob story ready for why she needs just a little help. So when she called crying about a breakup, saying she had nowhere to go, I hesitated. But my husband looked at me and said, "She just needs 2 months. She'll get back on her feet." 2 months. That sounded manageable. We could handle 2 months. The beginning. At first, things were fine. She mostly stayed in the guest room. We had dinners together. She even helped wash dishes once or twice. I thought, okay, maybe this will actually work out. But little things started to shift. She began borrowing my clothes without asking. I'd find my favorite sweater balled up on the couch or my lipstick in her purse. She'd cook huge meals, fancy ones too, like shrimp linguine or lasagna, and then leave the kitchen looking like a war zone. Pots everywhere, flour on the counter, sauce on the ceiling fan. I wish I were exaggerating. And the worst part? She started inviting friends over. At night, loud ones, without even asking. I'd come home from work, exhausted, and find strangers lounging in my living room, drinking my wine. I confronted her calmly, at first. She apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again. But of course, nothing changed. 3 months later, the 2 months became 3. Then 4. And still no job, no effort. Every day, I'd come home from work and find her sprawled on the couch, watching TV, surrounded by empty takeout boxes. She'd complain about her ex, complain about her luck, complain about how people just don't appreciate her energy. Meanwhile, I was working full-time. My husband was working full-time. And we were both cleaning up after a grown woman who refused to lift a finger. I finally snapped one night after stepping on one of her empty coffee cups in the hallway. I sat her down and said, "Lisa, it's been 3 months. You need to find another place to live. You've got 2 weeks. She started crying, big dramatic tears, accusing me of being heartless, saying she had nowhere else to go. And that's when my husband, my usually level-headed, logical husband, took her side. He said, "Maybe you're being too harsh. She's going through a tough time." I couldn't believe it. We'd agreed 2 months max. The line in the sand. I told him flat out, "If you want her to stay longer, fine. But you'll take responsibility for her. You'll handle her meals, her mess, and her drama." Because I'm done. He got defensive, said I was turning it into a power struggle. That's no one's to way. Then for mentoring, and so taken to advantage of, well, Stefan. But how do you argue with someone who's not even trying? Lisa kept telling people that I was kicking her out while she was struggling. And soon, my phone was lighting up with messages from his family calling me selfish, cold, unkind. But you know who stayed quiet? My own family. Because they know me. They know I don't throw people out for fun. They know when I've reached my limit. Online voices. When I shared this story online, people had strong opinions. One person wrote, "You agreed to 2 months, you've already given her more than that. She's freeloading. Your husband's enabling her. She needs to grow up and get out yesterday. It is not of no feeling." Another added, "She's not a house guest anymore. She's a parasite. You're not her savior, you're her safety net. And she's taking full advantage." And that hit hard because it was true. I wasn't helping her anymore. I was just delaying the moment she'd have to take care of herself. The breaking point. The night everything came to a head, I came home to find her blasting music at midnight. There were takeout boxes everywhere again. And she'd used my new baking sheets to reheat fries in the microwave. They were warped beyond repair. Something inside me just broke. I unplugged the speaker, looked her in the eye, and said, "You have exactly 1 week. The revenue matter was self to matter. We have the water was, the way can." She glared at me, muttering something under her breath about being betrayed by family. My husband tried to intervene, but I didn't budge. I told him, "You can pick a side. But if you pick hers, she can stay and I'll go." That shut him up. 2 weeks later, she finally moved out, not on her own, though her cousin took her in. The silence afterward felt like oxygen. I could breathe again. No more clutter. No more noise. No more drama. My husband still says I could have handled it better. But you know what? I did handle it. Because when someone refuses to take care of themselves, they'll gladly let you do it for them until you say no. Reflection. People often mistake kindness for weakness. But setting a boundary doesn't mean you're cruel. It means you've learned what peace costs and you're no longer willing to pay that price for someone else's comfort. Lisa will be fine, eventually. And maybe one day she'll thank me for the push. But until then, my home is mine again. And for the first time in months, it's quiet enough to hear myself think. There are moments in life that show you exactly where you stand in someone's heart. For me, that moment came less than 24 hours after I gave birth to our daughter. The birth. It was Monday night, just before midnight, when our little girl came into the world. She was 6 weeks early. Tiny. Fragile. Perfect. The doctors said she'd need 5 or 6 days in the neonatal unit, so they kept me in the hospital too. My husband and I already have a toddler at home, almost 3 years old. That night, when my contractions started, we dropped her off with my mom. My mom stayed up all night watching her, then took care of her all day Tuesday while I was recovering and the baby was being monitored. I was exhausted but happy. I kept thinking about how our lives had changed again, how full my heart felt, and when my mom said she'd bring our toddler to the hospital at 6 p.m. so she could meet her baby sister for the first time, I was so excited I could have cried. That first meeting, it was supposed to be special, a memory we'd keep forever. The game. When I told my husband the plan, he looked up from his phone and said, "I'll need to leave the hospital by 5. I thought he was joking. "Why?" I asked. He said it so casually, like it was no big deal. "I've got tickets to the football game tonight." I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh. But he didn't. He was serious. I said, "You can't be serious. Our baby was born yesterday. You're really going to a football game?" He shrugged. He said he thought my mom could keep our toddler another night, that she'd understand. I told him no. My mom had already done so much. She hadn't slept. She'd watched our daughter for 2 nights already, and I didn't want to ask her for more, he argued. Over and over, for hours. I had just gone through a horrific labor. My body ached. I was sitting in a hospital bed hooked up to machines, and I had to convince my husband to stay with his newborn and his recovering wife instead of going to a game, and the more he argued, the more my heart broke. "The choice," he said. "It's just one night. You'll be fine here. My friend's been waiting for these tickets." I told him, "You're a father now again. You don't get to choose between football and family." But he didn't see it that way. He told me I was making a big deal out of nothing, that I was being emotional. I broke down right there in the hospital bed. I told him how hurt I was, how abandoned I felt, how he was robbing me of a moment I dreamed of, our 2 daughters meeting for the first time, with both of us there. He didn't comfort me. He just looked frustrated. Reality check. The next day, he went back to work. Wednesday. He texted me once around 9 a.m., asking who was picking up our toddler from nursery and how the baby was doing. Then, nothing. No call, no check-in, no, "How are you feeling?" I sat in that hospital bed all day, staring at my phone, watching the minutes crawl by, realizing that the man who was supposed to be my partner was more present for his team than his own family. By 5 p.m., I looked at the clock and thought, he should have been leaving for that game right now. And instead of feeling relieved, I just felt numb. What really happened? He didn't end up going. But not because he suddenly realized how wrong he was. Because I told him my parents couldn't keep our toddler another night and there was no one else. He huffed, said fine, and canceled with his friend. But he was annoyed, not apologetic. He even tried to pawn off our toddler on a distant family member just so he could still go. That's when I told him, "If you do that, if you leave me here and miss our daughters meeting each other, I will never forgive you." He didn't respond. When my mom finally arrived with our toddler, I could see the joy in her eyes. The excitement. My little girl couldn't wait to meet her baby sister. And do you know what my husband did? He left the room. Didn't say a word. Didn't smile. Didn't take a picture. My mom looked at me, confused, and whispered, "Was he joking?" I said, "No. He meant it." When she left, I broke down, alone again. Later that night, my husband took our toddler home. He didn't kiss me goodbye. Didn't say, "I love you." Just walked out. And there I was again, alone in that hospital bed, holding a baby in an incubator beside me, wondering what I'd done to deserve a love so small. I kept waiting for an apology. It never came. What people said. When I shared this story online, people were furious on my behalf. One person wrote, "You're not crazy, he's selfish. The first 48 hours after birth are sacred. Any man who chooses a football game over his wife and newborn isn't ready for fatherhood." Another said, "Don't let him gaslight you into thinking you overreacted. You just gave birth. You're literally in the hospital. He should be thanking you, not fighting you." And the comments poured in, hundreds of women who'd gone through something similar. Husbands disappearing after delivery, making everything about themselves, treating the biggest moment of their wives' lives like an inconvenience. It made me realize how many of us are taught to lower our expectations, to accept crumbs and call it commitment. Reflection. I used to think marriage was about teamwork, that even when things got hard, we'd be in it together. But lately, it feels like I'm the only one carrying the weight. The sleepless nights, the feedings, the tears, all mine. And he gets to be the fun parent, the one who swoops in when it's convenient, then checks out when real effort is needed. But here's what I've learned. Love isn't about big gestures. It's about showing up, especially when it's inconvenient. And if someone can't do that, then maybe they were never really in it with you to begin with. You think after 20 years of marriage, you've seen it all. The highs, the lows, the laughter, the fights, everything. But no one warns you what it feels like when the person you love stops wanting to touch you. I'm 40. My husband is 45. We've been together for 2 decades. 20 years of shared birthdays, inside jokes, family dinners, small arguments, Sunday mornings, and for most of it, our marriage was good. Until, one day, intimacy just vanished like it had packed a bag and quietly left the house. When it started, it didn't happen all at once. At first, we just had sex less often, then less again, then it turned into months, then years. Now, we haven't had proper sex in 4 years. Sure, there were moments me trying to reach out, him brushing me off. I'd try to kiss him, touch him, but he'd pull away, or pretend to be tired. I've done everything to keep that spark alive. We've done couples therapy, sex therapy. He's had his testosterone checked, levels were normal, even above average, no medical cause, no depression. At least not that he'll admit to. He just says he's not in the mood. The conversations that go nowhere. I've asked him if it's me, if he's not attracted to me anymore, if I did something wrong. He says no, every time. Says it's not about me, just that he doesn't feel the need for it. Be saved from there till friendle, but how do you live in a marriage without touch, without warmth? I don't want to cheat. I don't want to leave. But I can't live the rest of my life being treated like a roommate. He sleeps next to me every night. Naked. And I can feel it, his body still responds. He's physically capable. He just doesn't want me. Or anyone. The breaking point. 1 week ago, he said something that shattered me. He said, I'd appreciate it if we didn't talk about sex anymore. I don't need it. I don't want it. And I'm not interested in it again, ever. That was it. The end of the discussion. No compromise, no empathy, no effort. He closed the door on that part of us and locked it. And now, I'm left standing outside it, holding the key, wondering if I should even bother knocking again. The questions. So I did what I always do when I'm lost. I wrote. I posted online. I told people everything, that we've tried therapy, that there's no medical reason, that he used to enjoy sex, that he slept with over 50 people before me. Someone asked me, then why did he do it back then? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, I did it because everyone else did. I was trying to figure out why they liked it. I never really did. 20 years. And I never knew that. The talk that ended everything. Last night, I finally told him the truth. I said, if you really don't want sex again, then you need to let me find it elsewhere. He looked at me like I'd just confessed to a crime. He said I was disgusting, called me a cheater, a slag, a sex addict, told me I had no respect for myself. But what about respect for me? For my needs? For the person he promised to love and cherish? I told him, calm as I could, you have 3 choices. 1. Tell me what's really going on. 2. Let me find physical connection somewhere else. 3. Or admit we're no longer compatible and split. And then this is proper key, then a reprited absent in class. And the reprited after now for menner. He didn't pick any. He just stormed out and went to stay with a friend. The morning after, he didn't come home, but his friends did, in the form of angry messages. They called me names, said I was cheating, that I humiliated him. He must have told them everything, or at least, his version of it. And as I read those texts, something inside me went cold. Because in all the noise, I realized the truth. He was never angry about sex. He was angry about control. By asking for permission, I reminded him he didn't get to decide for both of us anymore. What I finally said. So this morning, I texted him. You leaving and letting your friends harass me tells me everything I need to know. If you choose to stay in the house, I'll only pay my half of the mortgage until it's sold. I'm done begging for scraps of affection. Goodbye, Daryl. I stared at that message before hitting send, hands trembling. It wasn't anger that made me send it, it was grief. Because this wasn't about sex. It was about love that had turned into indifference. About 2 people lying side by side but living worlds apart. Reflection. People online were divided. Some said I should have stayed. That love is more than physical intimacy. Others said I should have left long ago. But here's what I know now. It's not about how often you make love. It's about whether the person beside you still sees you, still reaches for you, still wants you near. I tried everything. Therapy. Communication. Understanding. And in the end, the silence between us said more than words ever could. So now, I'm starting over. I don't know what comes next, heartbreak or freedom. But I do know this. I'd rather be alone than live in a marriage where I'm invisible. It's funny how the same thing that destroyed you once can come knocking again, only this time, wearing a familiar face and calling itself love. I've been married for just over a year. My husband knows what I make, how hard I've worked to get here, and how much I've fought to stand on my own 2 feet. But lately, he's been asking for something I swore no man would ever get from me again, control over my money. The past that built my walls. 10 years ago I was in a nightmare. I had 2 small kids and a partner who treated me like an employee instead of a person. He took control of every paycheck, every dollar I earned. He managed my account, gave me $50 a week for everything: gas, groceries, diapers. $50. There were weeks I had to choose between diapers for my newborn and my toddler. I remember standing in the diaper aisle, crying quietly, because I couldn't afford both. A stranger saw me and helped bought the diapers, handed me a little extra money, told me to hide it. When I got home, I was accused of stealing. He screamed at me for making him look bad. That day, I swore. Never again. I left him 3 months later, and since then, I've never let anyone control my finances, not completely, not even for a moment. The life I built after. Fast forward a decade, I rebuilt my life. Paid off over $118,000 in credit card debt. It took years, sacrifice, side jobs, coupons, sleepless nights, but I did it. When I met my husband, I told him everything. I thought honesty would keep us safe. At first, he admired me for it. He said I was strong, independent, disciplined. But now that we're married, those same traits seem to bother him. He wants me to trust him, to let him handle it. He says I should give him at least $300 a month for savings, or to help with utilities. I already pay for groceries, car insurance, the kids' clothes, and all the streaming services. He pays the mortgage and utilities. He says, if something happens to me, you'll need access to the savings. But here's the thing: I don't have access. It's his account, his name, his control. And something about that feels all too familiar. The pattern repeats. Every payday, he asks, how much are you putting into savings this time? And every time, I deflect. I tell him I'm saving privately, because I am. 5 months ago, I opened my own account at a different bank. No debit card, no app, just a physical branch. Every paycheck, I deposit $250 there. Quietly. He doesn't know about it, because honestly, I don't trust him. The hoodie incident. Last month, he sold one of his vehicles, got $16,000 for it, put it straight into his savings, then handed me $1,000 and said, spend it however you want. I thought maybe he was trying to show goodwill, so I used it responsibly. $200 in my account, $400 on early Christmas gifts for the kids, $275 for new glasses, $150 for contacts. When he asked what I did with it, I told him. He frowned. You already spent it? I gave you money and you blew through it that fast? I said, I bought necessities. And gifts for your kids too. He said, you're irresponsible. I shouldn't have given you that money. Then he asked for receipts. Receipts. For gifts. For my glasses. For my own money. That night, I realized it wasn't about finances, it was about control. The friends and the pressure. Lately, his friends have started joining in. When we go out for drinks, they'll joke, hey, pull out that debit card, it's your turn to pay. Or, you're married now. Time to share those savings. I usually smile, say nothing. But inside, I feel that old panic, that same sinking dread from 10 years ago when every dollar I earned felt like it belonged to someone else. The numbers he doesn't see. He claims I don't know how to save. That's his favorite line. But here's the truth. His bills are around $700 a month, including a $400 house payment. Mine? Car insurance $250, phone and internet $260, groceries $200, $400 weekly for a family of 5. I track every receipt. I budget down to the cent. I even coupon. He says I should just hand over what's left after bills. I say, sure, if I have full access to the account. He says, no, that's my responsibility. And that's when I knew this wasn't about partnership. It was about ownership. The breaking point. We tried to fix it. I suggested therapy. He refused. Said the only problem in our marriage was me. Then I suggested a compromise. Let's open a joint account for bills only. We each keep our own savings. That set him off. He said I was acting single, planning for divorce, keeping secrets. Funny thing is, he wasn't wrong about that last part, the goodbye. The next day, while he was at work, I found an apartment. Within 3 hours, I'd signed the lease and written a cashier's check for the deposit. When I got home, I told him, I'm leaving tomorrow. He looked shocked. How could you make a decision like that without talking to me first? I said, you bought a car without asking me. I found an apartment without asking you. Seems fair. Remembers is quest is more doc. He didn't like that answer. Freedom, finally. I filed for divorce on my birthday. Happy birthday to me, right? Since then, he's called me names: gold digger, cheater, ungrateful. He even accused me of causing his financial problems. He's living in the camper I helped pay for. He took out a loan against it, even after I gave him cash for it once before. Now he says I owe him money for the loan because it's ours. But you can't owe someone for something you already paid for, especially when the debt only exists because of their ego. I laughed when he said it. It was the freest laugh I'd had in years. Reflection. He says I stopped needing him. And maybe that's true. Because I finally realized that love built on control isn't love, it's fear. Now it's just me and my kids in a small apartment. We're thriving. I manage my own money. I pay my own bills. I make my own choices. And the peace that comes from that, it's worth every dollar I ever fought for. Freedom doesn't come in a single moment. It's not like flipping a switch. It happens piece by piece the moment you stop apologizing. The moment you stop explaining. The moment you finally say enough. And for me, that last piece fell into place the day he pulled up in our driveway with a new car I didn't know about. The car I didn't ask for. 3 days after we got back from a family event, I came home from work and there it was, the ugliest car I'd ever seen sitting in the driveway. I hadn't seen it before. I hadn't heard a word about it. My first thought was that it must have belonged to someone else, but when he came home hours later drunk, smelling like beer, I realized it was ours. Or rather, his. He stumbled in, grinning, and said, "What do you think?" "Got a great deal." I just stared at him. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask how much it cost. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. Too much. I pretended to be asleep that night so I wouldn't have to talk. I just couldn't take another argument. Not after years of justifying myself, defending every penny, walking on eggshells over groceries or gas or gifts for the kids. The next morning, he was angry. Not about the car, about me. He said, "You didn't even say goodnight last night." "Hen," I told him. "You came home 5 hours after the game. You were drunk. What did you want me to say?" He snapped, "Don't worry. I'm taking a loan out on the car to put the money back into my savings." He just enrowed. Thanks for watching. That was his answer to everything. Take out a loan. Pretend it's stability. Call it responsibility. He did the same thing with the camper. He'd turned everything we bought, everything I helped pay for, into something he could own on paper and use to control me. That morning, I didn't argue. I just went to work. And when I walked out that door, I made up my mind. The escape plan. By lunchtime, I'd found a place. A small apartment, nothing fancy, but bright, clean, and quiet. The leasing agent asked if I wanted to take a day to think about it. I said, "No, I've already thought enough." The right no day already. 3 hours later, I had keys in hand and a cashier's check for the deposit. It was done. That night, when he got home, I told him the truth. "I'm moving out tomorrow." He blinked like I'd spoken another language. "You're what?" "I've already signed the lease." He laughed a cold, disbelieving sound and said, "You can't just do that. You're married to me." And I said, "You bought a car without talking to me. I found an apartment without talking to you. Seems fair." For once, he didn't have an answer. Filing for freedom. The next morning, I packed everything I needed. Clothes, photos, a few of the kids' toys, my laptop. I left quietly. No yelling, no chaos, just peace. That same day, my birthday, I filed for divorce. It felt poetic. In a way, the day I was born became the day I was reborn. When he found out, he called me a gold digger. Then, a cheater. Then he said I'd ruined his life. But if his life could be ruined by me choosing independence, then it wasn't a life built on love, it was built on control. The camper argument. He's still living in the camper, the one I practically paid for, the one he took a loan out on after I gave him cash for it. Now he says I owe him for the loan because it's a shared asset. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I told him, "I already paid for that camper once. I'm not paying for your bad decisions twice." He didn't like that answer. He told me if I wanted to keep it, I'd have to buy it from him again in cash. I told him to sell it. He said, "You're so heartless." I said, "No. I'm finally done being your safety net." The accusations. He called me again last week, drunk of course, accused me of cheating, said that's why I left. He said, "Just tell me the truth. Who is he?" I told him, "There's no one else. That's the point. I'm finally alone, and it feels good." He didn't get it. He never would. Because for him, love wasn't about partnership. It was about control, appearances, ownership. When he couldn't own me, he couldn't handle me. Where I am now, the kids and I are in our little apartment now. It's quiet, humble, but it's ours. No one questions what I spend. No one tells me what to buy. I handle my own money. I make my own decisions. And somehow, for the first time in years, I sleep through the night. He still calls sometimes trying to guilt me, trying to bait me into arguments, but I don't answer anymore. Because when someone shows you who they are loud, clear, and consistent, the smartest thing you can do is finally believe them. Reflection. When I think back on everything, I realize I never wanted wealth. I wanted safety. And safety doesn't come from money, it comes from peace. He wanted someone who needed him. I wanted someone who respected me. And those two kinds of love can't live in the same house. So now, I'm choosing something simpler. No control. No manipulation. No accounts I can't access. Just me. Just peace. Just freedom. It's strange how silence can sound so heavy. When you've lived for years in noise and arguments, guilt, slammed doors, and financial lectures, real silence feels unnatural at first. You expect the phone to ring. You brace for another demand, another accusation. But then, nothing. That's where I am now. In the nothing. And for the first time in a long time, it's not scary. It's peaceful. The calls that don't matter anymore. At first, he wouldn't stop calling. One night, I counted 12 missed calls in 2 hours. Then came the voicemails. We need to talk. You're overreacting. I didn't do anything wrong. You're ruining this family. The last one was just him crying, or pretending to. I listened once, then I deleted it. I realized I'd been conditioned to think that walking away made me cruel. But leaving isn't cruelty, it's clarity. When you've been gaslit long enough, peace feels like rebellion, and I've decided I can live with that. The stories he told. Apparently I'm the villain now. His friends have heard a dozen versions. I drained his bank account. I lied about my debts. I cheated. Funny how men like that rewrite history, how they turn accountability into accusation. He tells everyone I walked out for no reason, but never mentions that he'd been controlling my finances for months. He tells people he tried to make it work, but never mentions the part where he refused therapy, or bought cars without asking, or demanded receipts for eyeglasses. He leaves out the part where I cried in the grocery store parking lot because I was terrified to spend money on formula that week. He leaves out the truth. But I've stopped trying to correct his story. Because people who want to believe lies will, no matter what you say. The things I've learned. When you go through something like this, you start learning in layers. The first lesson is survival. The second is peace. The third, the hardest, is forgiveness. Not for him, for yourself. For staying too long. For mistaking control for care. For calling fear protection. For apologizing every time you took up space. I've stopped apologizing now. The camper debt. He still calls about the camper. Still says I owe him. He texted last week. You're legally responsible for half the loan. I replied. You took that loan out to cover your own ego. I paid for my half in cash. We're even. Then I blocked him. He can live inside that lie if he wants to, inside that camper that he thinks makes him powerful. I've built something better. A home where peace lives rent-free. The kids, and the healing. At first I worried about how the kids would handle it. They were used to the big house, the backyard, the rhythm of life with 2 parents. But they adjusted faster than I expected. They laugh more now. Sleep better. We cook together, watch old movies, make pancakes for dinner. No tension. No yelling. No eggshells. One night, my oldest said, Mom, it's quieter now. But it feels nicer. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Children don't need perfection. They need peace. The unexpected freedom. I used to check prices on everything. Now, I still budget carefully, but I don't panic when I buy something small, like a hoodie or coffee with a friend. I don't hear his voice in my head asking, do you really need that? I don't have to explain where every dollar goes. I don't need permission to exist. That's the kind of freedom you can't put a price on. The friends who stayed. It's funny how leaving someone reveals the truth about everyone else too. Some people quietly faded away, the ones who loved him more than they respected me. Others stepped up, friends who showed up with boxes, trucks, casseroles, and quiet understanding. One of them said, I've never seen you this calm. It suits you. And she was right. Calm feels strange when chaos used to be your normal. But it's the best kind of strange. The future I'm building. I'm not rushing into anything, not dating, not planning, not proving, just living. I wake up early now, make coffee, watch the sun hit the kitchen counter. It sounds small, but after years of walking on eggshells, even silence feels like a sunrise. I'm saving money again on my terms, in my account, with no one hovering over my shoulder. I'm teaching my kids about budgeting, independence, and respect, lessons I had to learn the hard way, and slowly, piece by piece. I'm remembering who I was before I had to shrink myself to fit someone else's comfort. Reflection. I think about the woman I used to be, the one who begged for permission to buy diapers, the one who handed over her paycheck, the one who said thank you for $50. If I could talk to her now, I'd tell her, you don't need to earn your freedom, you just need to choose it. Because love isn't supposed to feel like control, it's supposed to feel like safety. And now that I've finally found that safety, not from a man, but from within myself, I'll never give it up again. When I look back over everything, the ring, the cameras, the affair, the silence, the control, it almost feels like a series of different lives, different women, different homes, different heartbreaks. But they all carry one truth. Every story begins with love, and ends when that love turns into something else. The widow, and the ring. She wasn't clinging to the past, she was protecting the only piece of it that still felt real. That simple gold band wasn't about jewelry. It was about connection. A symbol that said, this mattered. He mattered. When her daughter-in-law called it selfish, She mistook sentiment for possession. Because people who've never lost something irreplaceable can't understand how fragile memory becomes when it's all you have left. That story wasn't about a ring. It was about permission, the right to grieve in your own way. And when she hid that ring away, she wasn't being cold. She was keeping love safe. The mother and the cameras. Then there was the new mom, the one with the baby, and the mother-in-law who thought she knew best. People say experience makes you wise. But sometimes it just makes you stubborn. That young woman learned the hardest lesson of motherhood. That boundaries aren't cruelty. They're care. Because love without respect is just interference dressed up as family. When she installed those cameras, it wasn't paranoia, it was protection. And for the first time, she wasn't just defending herself, she was defending her child. The wife and the affair. And then there was the woman who found out her husband had a secret family. There are betrayals that bruise. And then there are betrayals that change your DNA. She could have screamed. She could have fought. But instead, she packed her daughter's things, locked the doors, and moved her child somewhere safe. That wasn't anger. That was clarity. When your home becomes a battlefield, safety comes before civility. And even though it broke her heart, she walked away before her daughter learned to accept betrayal as love. Because she understood something too many people forget. Forgiveness isn't always the kindest choice, sometimes protection is. The sister-in-law who stayed too long. Then came the woman whose peace was stolen by someone else's chaos. She opened her home, offered help, and her kindness was mistaken for weakness. But when she finally said, enough, she wasn't cruel, she was reclaiming her space. Because generosity should never be repaid with entitlement. That story wasn't about throwing someone out, it was about learning that love doesn't mean endless tolerance. Sometimes no is the most loving word you can say, especially to yourself. The mother alone in the hospital. Then, there was the wife, sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding her newborn while her husband argued about football tickets. That one still hurts to think about, because she didn't want much, just a moment. A shared memory. The sight of her toddler meeting her baby sister while their father stood beside her. But he chose a game instead. And in doing so, he showed her that her pain wasn't a priority. Her joy wasn't enough. And her motherhood was something he could take for granted. It wasn't about the football game. It was about presence. And he wasn't there. So she learned something that day. Sometimes you have to stop begging for partnership from someone who only shows up when it's convenient. The wife who lived beside a stranger. Then there was the woman married to silence. The one who begged for connection. Not because she wanted pleasure, but because she needed proof that love still existed between them. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat. He just stopped caring. And sometimes that's worse, because at least when someone shouts, you know they still feel something. But when they go quiet, it's like watching love evaporate. She asked for honesty. He gave her indifference. And so she left. Not because she wanted freedom from marriage, but because she wanted freedom from invisibility. The woman who took back her wallet. And finally, the woman who fought her way back from control. She wasn't chasing money. She was chasing autonomy. Her story wasn't about greed. It was about dignity. Every dollar she saved was a reminder of the years she'd spent asking for permission to survive. And every dollar she protected was an act of rebellion against the voice that told her she wasn't responsible enough, smart enough, strong enough. When she walked away, she didn't just leave a husband. She left a cage disguised as a home. And the quiet that followed? That was the sound of her life coming back to her. The common thread. All these stories share one thing. Women choosing themselves after being told they couldn't. Different ages, different lives, different battles, but the same awakening. Because at some point, every woman learns that peace is louder than validation. That boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you close when someone keeps barging in. And that love, without respect, is just a trap that looks like safety. The lessons. If there's anything these stories teach us, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to your grief. You don't owe anyone trust they haven't earned. You don't have to share your home, your body, your money, or your time just to prove you care. Real love doesn't ask for blind obedience. It doesn't guilt you into silence. It doesn't make you smaller to make someone else feel bigger. The turning point. Some people will call these women selfish, but that's because the world still expects women to be endless, to give, to forgive, to endure. But the truth is you can't pour from an empty cup. And these women finally stopped trying. They stopped apologizing for saying no. They stopped defending their pain. They stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. And in doing so, they became something the people around them didn't recognize anymore. Free. Reflection. Every story here ends the same way. Not with revenge. Not with anger. With peace. The widow with her ring. The mother with her cameras. The wife who packed her daughter's things. The sister-in-law who reclaimed her home. The mother in the hospital bed. The wife who slept beside silence. The woman who took back her life. They all walked away from chaos and toward something simple themselves. And maybe that's what strength really looks like. Not loud. Not flashy. Not perfect. Just quiet, steady, whole. There's a moment in every story, the kind that doesn't make noise, doesn't break anything, doesn't even look dramatic from the outside, but inside, it feels like an earthquake. That moment when you stop asking, "Am I wrong?" and start saying, "This isn't right." That's what all these women found in their own way. A quiet moment of truth where permission turned into power. The ring that stayed in the box. She never gave away that ring, not because she couldn't bear to part with it, but because she finally understood she didn't need to justify her grief. Love doesn't expire when someone dies. It lives in the objects we keep, the silence we sit in, the memories we hold when the world moves on without them. She didn't need anyone to understand. She just needed to hold on to the one thing that still made her feel whole. And that's enough. The cameras that guarded the crib. The mother who installed cameras wasn't paranoid, she was brave. Because saying no to family is one of the hardest things a new mother can do. Especially when that no protects a child too young to protect himself. She wasn't trying to start a fight. She was trying to stop one, the invisible one between generations, that treats new boundaries like betrayal. But she didn't bend this time. She held her ground. And because of that, her son grew up in a home built on safety, not submission. The marriage that ended in truth. The woman whose husband confessed his affair will always remember the sound of her daughter crying in that hallway, scared, confused, heartbroken. But she'll also remember the next morning, when she packed her child's things and left. That wasn't running away. That was running towards something better. Sometimes people say, you have to stay for the kids. But staying in a broken home doesn't save them, it teaches them to settle. Leaving was the first lesson her daughter learned about self-respect, and maybe the most important one. The home that became a haven again. The woman who asked her sister-in-law to leave never wanted to be cruel, but kindness without limits becomes self-destruction. She'd opened her door out of love. But when that love started drowning her peace, she realized something every giver must one day learn. You can't save people who refuse to stand up. So she closed that door, and for the first time in months, her house felt like a home again. The mother in the hospital bed. That young mom who sat in a hospital bed, waiting for a husband who never came back, learned the hardest truth about partnership. Love isn't proven by presence at the wedding, it's proven by presence when things get hard. He chose a football game over a memory that would never happen again. And in that moment, she realized something deeper. She didn't lose her partner that night, she finally saw who he really was. Painful clarity. But clarity nonetheless. The marriage that faded into silence. The woman who begged to be touched, wasn't asking for lust. She was asking to be seen. It's one of the loneliest kinds of heartbreak, sleeping beside someone who treats you like air. And yet, when she finally said, "Let me go," she didn't just walk out on a man, she walked back into her own life. Because she learned that love without connection isn't love, it's endurance. And endurance isn't intimacy, it's survival. The woman who took her life back, dollar by dollar. And the one who finally said no to financial control. She became the voice for every woman who's ever been told she's bad with money just because she wanted access to her own. She wasn't fighting for wealth, she was fighting for dignity. She didn't want his account, his approval, or his permission. She wanted freedom, and she earned it. $1 and one boundary at a time. When she left with her kids and started over, it wasn't just a move, it was a rebirth. The common ending. None of these women asked to be heroes. They didn't set out to make a statement. They just wanted to love and be loved in peace. But when peace became something they had to ask for, they built it themselves. Each of them made a choice the world often punishes women for making. To stop choosing everyone else first. The healing. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's in small things, a new lock on the door, a quiet dinner without tension, the sound of a baby sleeping safely. The first time you buy something without guilt. It's in laughter that doesn't need permission, in mornings that don't start with fear, in bank accounts that have your own name on them, and only yours. It's the peace that comes when you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting to be free. The closing words. If there's one message woven through every story, it's this. Love is not measured by sacrifice, it's measured by respect. You can forgive without forgetting. You can let go without hate. You can move on without closure. And you can rebuild stronger, steadier and softer all at once. Because real power isn't loud. It's quiet. It's choosing peace when the world calls it selfish. It's holding on to your ring, your child, your dignity, your freedom, and never letting anyone make you feel guilty for it. These women didn't just walk away, they walked home, to themselves.